Good morning, everybody. How are we doing today? It's a lovely Wednesday morning. We got spring settling in. We all ready for some of that. Hopefully, wherever you're at, this virus thing is kind of getting under control and the vaccines are getting out there, and hopefully we can start assembling again with some kind of regularity and normalcy. I think all of us need that. We're getting a little thirsty for connection. We're kind of drying out. We need that fellowship, that community, that sense of belonging. There's a validation that comes from face-to-face conversation, and there's something that's lacking with the internet. You know, even with video conferencing and stuff, you still miss body language, and you miss slight facial conjectures and expressions and the little feelings of joy or satisfaction or understanding. Some of these are much tougher to grasp in a video conference call versus sitting there next to somebody and really talking. You know when you're having a conversation with someone face to face, if they're picking up what you're laying down. You can tell if they're comprehending. And likewise, I think when I'm soaking up what somebody's saying to me, it helps so much more to grasp and to focus on someone's when they're sitting there right next to you. And I know I'm ready to start seeing faces and familiar friends and getting back into the community. I do have my first few gigs booked for this summer. Hopefully the conditions will allow for everything to keep going forward. It's been a trying year, hasn't it? My goodness. We're listening to a fun record right now. Take your pick. Billy Bean, great guitar player, along with Johnny Pisano, obviously an Italian character, probably East Coast, on the Decca label. It's on the Decca 9200 series, which the normal Decca sequence runs 8,000 through 8,600 or something like that. They started a little jazz sequence, and it's 9200, and I only think it's a dozen titles long or so. And this is 9212. That Barry Galbraith is in that sequence. I think I have one other one in that sequence as well. I've not always bought Deccas when I've seen them. I've been buying them more as of late. And a lot of Decca's finest jazz gets eschewed off onto the Chorale label, where they do some good stuff. But I've really been immersed lately in a lot of West Coast jazz. I've been collecting a lot of West Coast labels, kind of filling in some discographies for Pacific, Fantasy, Contemporary. There's a Capitol series that has Stan Kenton Presents stuff that's really high quality, modern, up-tempo jazz. And again, that's only a dozen titles or so as well. Capitol Maine label has some good stuff. RCA has some stuff from the West Coast, as does Columbia, and Decca Chorale has some. But you know, Pacific, Contemporary, Fantasy are the three big West Coast labels with big discographies. But there's a dozen smaller labels. Some that made large contributions, others that were only there briefly. But Jazz West has 9 or 10 titles that are, some of them are very important titles in the history of jazz. GNP, G Norman Presents, another great West Coast label that has some really good work on it. I've been collecting the Nocturne label, which was founded by one of the members of the Pacific record label, Roy Hart, I believe. Am I getting that wrong? And Harry Babison, the bass player. They founded Nocturne. They only recorded 10 inches, and of those 10, only 8 were released, and then the other 2 got released decades later. And I think there's Japanese vinyl for one of the 2. I think the Steve White one never had a vinyl release ever that I know of. And Liberty also reissues some of the Nocturne stuff in their Hollywood Jazz series. And I've also been grabbing some of that stuff on the Liberty label, which, like I said, is from Nocturne. There's just a lot of little labels. Hi-Fi Jazz makes a number of really important recordings on the West Coast. Andex makes a dozen recordings on the West Coast. And this body musician is a pretty impressive cream of the crop. the best of the best. The White Cats didn't necessarily flock to New York in the same way. They flocked to the West Coast. And there's so many jazz labels recording these guys. And so many of them, as I've said before, have membership in the Stan Kenton Orchestra, the Woody Herman Herds. So they're part of these big band ensembles. But just like the Black Swing Cats, they want to do more smaller, challenging arrangements on their own with smaller groups. And boy, they put out some really great stuff. And I've been enjoying digging through all these little labels and finding their bodies of work. And like I said, I've been finding some pretty rare stuff. But rare white collectible versus rare black collectible, just the supply and demand. A, those records probably were printed in more volume. And B, there's that many fewer people collecting them today because so many people have forgotten most of these guys. And so it just keeps the prices down, which as a collector today, I'm happy for that. I do have most of the great black jazz at this point from this era. And it's the White Cats I've been filling in. And I've already always had a lot of it. The Chet Bakers, the Jerry Mulligans, excuse me, the Stan Getzes. Like, there's a lot of white jazz I've had. But I'm filling in some of those in between the crack labels that had small bodies of work, but still made some of the most cutting-edge modern West Coast jazz that these White Cats were doing. I've talked to you a lot about the Bethlehem division on the West Coast, where they make some incredible West Coast jazz white records that are just these kids swing. You know, they're some of the most talented players in the business. There's a much bigger white population in the nation, so when you cream the crop of the white musicians, you're getting the best of the best. You know, and they had better instruments, better schoolings, better recording students. The entire thing was set up for the white musicians to be more successful. And it's funny how much history has reversed that lens. You know, some of them are now just in complete obscurity. A guy like Bob Envelson or Bob Cooper or even Marty Peisch. Like, these guys aren't very popular. People don't really know these names of the Stu Williamsons, the Charlie Marianos. There's just so many great players. And having been digging these labels and collecting them and trying to find some obscure titles, like I said, none of them are that expensive compared to old Blue Notes or old Riversides or old Savoys even. So it's been kind of fun. But what I want to talk to you about today was yesterday I put on Hank Mobley's No Room for Squares. And I'll be honest, I hadn't listened to a Blue Note in probably 2 or 3 weeks. And I decided, you know, I need some Blue Note in my life. And what splashed through my ears? The sonic explosion of these men. It's hard to express, but there's a tightness that's not about rehearsal. I'm not saying in that sense. There's a tightness that's an apprehension, a nervousness, an anxiety that creates this viscous tension that rides along the top of these black men's expressions. And it was only clearer to me than it's ever been, in light of having not listened to much black jazz the last month, and no Blue Note hardly at all. And I know the Blue Note discography fairly well. I've had all of it for a long time. And I think I slipped on a Tone Poet a few weeks ago that I had only heard once or twice, and I was digging that. So it wasn't like I totally hadn't heard any Blue Note. But after having listened to hours of white, hard-driving, West Coast, brilliant jazz, playing that Mobley yesterday, playing this Blakey today, it's so desperate. It's hard to really quantify, but it just sounds and feels so tangibly different. And you might wonder, how can it be? And it's not about ability. It's not about talent. just doesn't reflect any of that. It just has a desperation and a frustration that it's hard to really quantify. And I think a lot of listeners make this mistake. They spend so much time immersed in the great hard bop records or the avant-garde free records that they don't have the context of what the rest of the body of the canon sounds like anymore to even truly be able to value the edge and the desperation and all what that hard bop's innovations were if you don't have the regular body of work to compare it to. And I think it's very informative and resourceful to have a broad sense of what jazz is, just in order to be able to understand why that is so significant. It's a thing that's lost, I think, on a lot of collectors today. So many collectors are only buying post-60, well-marketed, and often very edgy jazz. The edges of the music. And if it's not Mingus, if it's not Ornette Coleman, if it's not John Coltrane, it's not cool enough or hip enough for them. And if you don't have the context of what the rest of the canon sounds like, you don't really even get the importance and significance of what these innovations that were happening in the East Coast, in the black community, politically, socially, environmentally, economically. There's a lot of things happening that require context to be able to hear. And I get kind of tired of people in the Facebook jazz groups talking about, oh, this is my favorite record of all time. And you got 30 jazz records. You can't really make statements like that unless you have a huge library and know something about a lot of it. And I rarely will talk about my favorites or best of all time kind of things because it's such a obtuse thing to even speak about. And so to say this is the best jazz record ever, and I've seen that claim being made about some records that aren't in the top 1,000 jazz records. You know, I've seen a lot of people post, oh, this is the best jazz record of all time, you need to have it. And I'm like, really? You think that's the greatest jazz record of all time? Who did you ask on that? Because ain't no one who knows something about it would even mention that record. And everyone's an expert. That's part of the problem with the jazz community is we're an intellectual bunch. Our intellectualism gives us a high degree of ego. We don't necessarily need to be or want to be teachable. We all kind of think we know a lot. We're all very much self-taught. We do rely more on the vinyl community now and the internet and YouTube probably than we used to, but it's still very much a very pious, unteachable in general community. And jazz is probably the most that of any branch of the music kingdom. There's just not a lot of people out there saying, oh, I'm a jazz fan, teach me everything because I know nothing. Jazz people are very much an elitist group. And often when the band's staying ahead, there's points in that could easily be some of the West Coast ensembles I've been listening to. It's more when the soloists break off into their solo expressions. But even on some of these head arrangements, there's this angular tension. It's the only word I can really... It's hard to even quantify it. But it just has this... There's a danger up ahead. An uncertainty that lurks around every door, around every corner, over every hill. There's an unknown that the black male can express in this country in a way that a white man's never even experienced. You know what I mean? Short of having a drunk wife and not knowing when that's going to come home and explode on you, you don't know when your life's going to crumble around you. And it just creates a tightness, nervousness. Boy, and you can hear it here. It's absolutely a reflection of their experience, the environment that they've been brought up in and born into, and then how each man's personality inflects upon that experience in that environment. And those are the three brushstrokes I've talked about many times on my channel. One's environment, one's experience within that environment, and then one's personality that will help dictate how I handle that experience within my environment. And the environment of the black male in America is a very tense place. And it's only more so going back 60, 70 years. The environment, the experience within that environment is one of lost relatives, incarcerated relatives, drug addiction, lost parents, youth that are angry, that are resolved to often a life of crime out of necessity. Unemployment's not there opportunity-wise. So oftentimes the black male is under target most of his life. And even this generation of hard bop players that come up, post Parker and Gillespie, these are still kids that grew up in the 30s and the 40s, often served in the army, had their inequality slapped in their face on a daily basis, have seen untold members of the black community killed, murdered, incarcerated for life, disappeared from the scene. Being a jazz player was by no means a shelter from prosecution, incarceration. Lots of great black jazz musicians spend years in prison during their careers. It's really, there's an edge to it. And it was really driven home yesterday after having listened to nothing but all these great white players from the West Coast. And like I said, they can play as good, if not better, than most of the black cats. These white cats are badass. I've been so enjoying them. However, I put that Mobley No Room for Squares on yesterday, and right off the bat, there's this ember of unreleased terror, exhaustion. And it fuels the music. It propels it and drives it through that roller coaster of changes at breakneck speed. And the exhaustion just fuels and pours out of them. And it was really clear to me yesterday. It was just like, wow. There's just a whole nother level of texture to this. Versus a lot of the same white players playing the same white songs with the same instruments. Yet, there's just something. Like I said, it's a hard thing to quantify, but it was crystal clear to me yesterday, the difference in that tonality. Blue Note is a special legacy, and it's something that I think we take for granted, and we don't appreciate it if all we ever listen to is Blue Note. If all we ever listen to is Blue Note and Impulse, we don't recognize that innovation or even know what it means to have someone say, oh, this is special because. We have to have the rest of the body of assembled work to comprehend what these changes that were happening in hard bop. It's another thing that's hard for people to grasp is that in a given year in jazz, I'm actually going to try to add these numbers up because I've completed most of the great jazz labels from the late 40s and the early 50s into the 60s. And there's infinite small labels and reissue labels and budget labels. So it's going to be a hard number to truly quantify. But most of these labels are putting out 30 to 50 records a year. And there's probably 40 or 50 jazz labels that were fairly important. Some made very small contributions that were gone. Others put out 50 records in a year. But I'm guessing in the average year, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 important jazz records come out in America. And of that, 25, 30 were Blue Note. You understand what I'm saying? So we think it's such the complete story, the complete picture. But in truth, Blue Note represents 5% of the average jazz releases in a given year, maybe 5%. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to do a record on these West Coast labels as an episode. And I want to quantify a little bit better by numbers just exactly how many records came out in a given year in a rough sense, and then do the percentages and recognize that these labels that we have hold in such high esteem today, they're by no means the entire story. They're a small corner of the jazz landscape. And I think it's important for more people out there who want to talk about jazz and break down jazz and digest jazz and have opinions on jazz to have a better example and a better understanding of both the left and right of the jazz kingdom and all that existed in the center. And a lot does exist in the center. And so, to understand that these weren't normal records, we have to have a better comprehension of what the normal was and what normal sounded like and looked like. And again, it's not a tempo thing, it's not an ability thing, it's not even really a race thing, it's an experience within America thing. And you can be white and come up with all kinds of crisis and difficulties in your life. Will they be as overbearing and as omnipresent as the black experience in America? It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to be a white guy in America and carry the load that the average black male carries. You can have a bundle of sorrow. But every time you walk into a grocery store, the heads don't all turn and look at you and be like, oh. Like, it's just a different experience that white entitlement, that white privilege gets us. And so many of us don't even recognize it or see it. I'm watching Treme. What a great show, a very jazz-centered show around New Orleans and the post-Katrina experience of that city and how music was a big part of the healing process and how music so defines that culture. There's a microculture in New Orleans that doesn't exist anywhere quite like that in the world, where they march and they parade and they second line and they just are exuberantly expressing the joy and sorrow of life through music and dance. And you're coming to this world, and we're going to throw a parade for your birth, and when you pass, we're going to dance our way out of the cemetery back to the church. It's a pretty special relationship that New Orleans has with music and costume and the fantasy world of mythology, and just it's dreamy almost. And yet the city was going through this life and death cycle and had been abandoned by a lot of the nation. People were suggesting let's not even fix New Orleans. And one of the great haunting nightmares I have is picturing how many great jazz collections were lost in Katrina. So many great jazz artists call New Orleans home. So many great jazz musicians obviously are going to collect jazz vinyl from the 78 era all the way through to the present. And I'm sure some of them have the time and the money to move their belongings to higher ground. And not all parts of New Orleans obviously are below sea level, but some of those districts of the 9th Ward and the Treme, some of those places where things were bad, some great records got washed away. One of the great scenes in the Treme in this last episode, they flash back to before Katrina, and they show one of the players trying to grab his records, as many as he could. His woman's like, come on, we don't got time for that. He's like, I can't leave my kid Ori, my Bobby Dodds. These things are important. They're as important as Civil War documents. They're as important as the founding fathers and old coins and stamps. These records tell the story of America. And it's not always a happy story full of pride and prejudice. There's a lot of ugly details that constitutes those red stripes on that flag. It represents blood, and boy, it's been born birthed in blood. And the blood of the Negro built the infrastructure that this empire rests upon. The bones and the blood and the marrow of enslaved people created the institutions and the infrastructure that our great civilization rests upon. And when you factor in that we stole the land and the resources from the people who lived here indigenously, and then we enslaved the workers who built our empire, and then you cross-reference that into the modern world, if I steal your factory and don't pay your workers, it's going to be a hard time for me not to make a profit. It's going to be a hard time for me not to be successful. How am I going to mess it up? If I don't have a mortgage to pay because I didn't pay for any of these buildings or any of these equipment, I just stole that shit all from you by killing you, and then I put a bunch of workers in there and didn't pay any of them a cent. That business is going to make some money. And it's going to be hard for it to lose money. And let's never forget that behind every great fortune lies a great crime. And the assemblage of untold wealth of the robber barons and the first industrialists and the early bankers and merchants, that consolidation of wealth that comes through and magnifies itself in the Industrial Revolution, propels itself into the world wars. This consolidation of wealth was built on some of the greatest crimes in human history. And we still allow these wealthy, rich people of zero morality to govern us. We still allow them to control our media and tell us what to think. Do you think they're worthy of our trust? Do you think they're worthy of believing everything they say? How far will they go to protect their profits? Not only from A, reducing, but B, to keep continuing the growth of those profits. The gun industry doesn't want regulation because of freedom. They don't want to have their profit margins cut into. Money is a strange master. And jazz has been so interwoven into all this fabric. Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, they're little Old Testament prophets bringing a message of freedom to a people enslaved, saying, you know what? Someday we will find Canaan in that promised land. We will march out of here. We might be in the lion's den right now. We might be in the fire. But this is giving us a moral compass and a moral authority to comprehend and to comment on what right should look like. It takes centuries of wrong being done to your people for you to know what right should be. And here we are. And boy, things are still a mess. But when you listen to that black jazz, a lot of what you're hearing is the intercessory prayers of a people saying, boy, justice sure would be great someday, and this is what it should look like. I should be able to take my kid to school and not worry about his safety. I should be able to have my child pulled over at night and not worry about him being assassinated. And I can't think of a more difficult job than being a black mother. My wife worked in the homeless center here in Rochester, Minnesota throughout the pandemic. She ran that thing. She was working with homeless very closely. And let me tell you, my level of anxiety during that whole time was very high. I was so proud of her, and she worked so hard and did so many things. It's so impressive that she was willing to sacrifice that much of herself to help others in need. Not everyone has that in them. And some people need to do that in order to feel good about themselves, to have a place and a value in this world. But I was so worried about her. Is today the day some drunk guy does something? Is today's the day some needle? Is today the day some guy breathes on her and gives her COVID and makes her ill? She's going to bring it home to all of us. It was exhausting, the continual feeling of terror that lived inside of me every day. I couldn't wait for her to come home just to be safe and in my arms. It was exhausting. And I often compared it to how a lover or a mother must feel when their son's off at war. The tension and anxiety that you must live in every day, knowing that the one you love may not come home. And a parent with a son at war, they serve a few tours, they come home. When you're a black mother, that's a for life commitment to a person who's going to live on the edge of danger all of their life, regardless of the choices they make. I mean, you can make good and bad choices as a black man, obviously. But there's plenty of cases of black men who were students, who were being successful, professors, entrepreneurs, who have still been shot dead in cold blood. So you can have the most innocent child, the most intellectual child, spiritually gifted child, and they could still have their life cut short in a flash. As a black mother, you spend a lot of time praying. You take a lot of pain medicine just to calm your nerves. And I went through it for over a year with my wife, and I know how that anxiety feels, how it gnaws at you, how it frays your ends, how you feel so exhausted from this burden that you carry. worrying about the people you love. And a war mother must worry even more. Because COVID wasn't going to be fatal, very likely, to my wife, but it was still a deathly anxiety. As a black mom, it's a lifetime of concern. This doesn't end when they're 20, it doesn't end when they're 30, it doesn't end when they're 40. We live in a nation where the average life expectancy of a black male is 10 years smaller than a white male. I think that number's actually come down some in the last few decades, but it's still a shocking disparity and a racial demarcation that shouldn't exist. The color of one's skin shouldn't dictate how long you live in a nation. And it's a shocking number, as are the incarceration numbers, as are the number of blacks with health care. It's just an unequal system still that's filled with violence and fear. And it's got to be tough being a cop as well. Going to work every day and not knowing. Let's take the day someone takes out their revenge on me and my buddy. You know, being filled with fear, being always on edge yourself. But the cop has that gun on his side, and for the most part has society's blessing to do as they see fit, unless you really cross a line. And even then, often nothing has been done. So the experience of the black mother, which is something me and my wife have talked about a lot. When I DJ'd in the black community a lot, you see the things that black mothers post about their college-going student. When there's protests, when there's things going on, these mothers are on their knees pleading to God for their children's safety. For a 23-year-old black male, they're in tears. They're beside themselves with concern. A white mother has to worry if Jimmy has his mittens. A black mom has to say, Jimmy, when you talk to the cops, say yes, sir, no, sir. That's a different experience. And jazz reflects that every time a black man puts that horn to his mouth. Every time Blakey picks up those sticks and starts pounding out the demons that are his drum set. He's evicting all that sorrow, all that tension. And if you don't listen to it for a while and you come back to it, I've been listening to some pop music, a little R&B, some reggae. We're kind of mixing it up a little bit lately. My stepmother was here for a few weeks, so I was trying to put other things on when she was here as well. When you come back to that stream of black consciousness, especially those Blue Note records of the late 50s, boy, it's rewarding. And I just want people to dig deeper into jazz so they can get the full extent of what Blue Note is saying. It's a special thing. Y'all be safe. Appreciate y'all checking out the channel. Subscribe if you haven't. If you want to support the channel, go to my Patreon and donate $5 a month. It'll be very appreciated, and we'll thank you for that. And the money does go back into the channel and buying some records and things like that, and helping support my family as well. If you want to go to my jazz merchandise store, I got some pretty cool